What's going on, everyone? It's Starfield Dad here, and we are less than 30 days away from the release of Starfield. With that in mind, I wanted to put out a series of videos talking about what builds I'll be running, especially on day one of Starfield. This will be the first of many build videos, and on day one, if this build does help you out, let me know in the comments and think about subscribing to check out all of my future build videos. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the first build in this video I want to discuss is going to be the melee build. That's a tried and true build in any BGS game. And if this is your first time playing a BGS game, one of the more important aspects of them and Starfield, of course, coming up, is going to be the build crafting system. Players can create play styles that perfectly suits you. It allows you to create a unique build by combining various weapons, armor, and abilities. And hopefully this build, the melee one, will support you in just that. Now, the reason I wanted to start off with the melee build because it's quite simply the simplest build you can do and sometimes the most effective. Melee focused builds can be used in one of two ways. The first is without weapons, striking with your hands. This is the most likely a late game feature requiring you to max out your physical skill tree to take advantage of the Neurostrike skill in the fourth tier of the physical skill tree line. And the second, and what most players are likely to use throughout the majority of their playthrough, is using melee and brawler style weapons like knives, axes, etc., which have been seen in the gameplay footage thus far. Now, what we're assuming will be one of the first things you select when you start up the character creation is going to be your background. And for this, I found the best starting background for a melee build is going to be the chef background. Mainly because you will start with gastronomy, dueling, and scavenging. Now, dueling skill is perfect because it provides a benefit to melee weapons and is even said to often be deadlier than range combat weapons when carried out by a skilled practitioner. Melee, brawler, and close quarter combat style builds need to rely on speed and skill passives to increase damage and strike with deadly force. We will want to pair this with a melee style weapon choice for optimal damage. Now, unfortunately, we do know in Starfield that you can only choose one background to start out with. And this helps determine your character's origin story, 3 starting skills, and gives you certain buffs and benefits and NPC reactions. There are multiple ways to play each type of build, but for you to be intentional about your specific background because the 3 starting skills give you a big advantage early on in the game. The description of the chef background goes as follows. While the unrefined masses scarf down chunks by the shipload, you cater to those with a more discerning plate. In your kitchen, countless alien species become true culinary masterpieces. Now, to break down those 3 starting skills, first, gastronomy is access to brand new words means access to brand new ingredients. You can craft specialty foods and drinks and additional research recipes at a research lab. Now, I have a feeling that's going to be key going forward, especially in the late game, as to crafting a multitude of things that will only help you on your journey. The second skill is dueling, which is considered by many to be a lost art. Close attacks with a melee weapon can often be deadline than range combat when carried out by a skilled practitioner. Possibly melee weapons do more damage. And the third skill is scavenging, which says you can find just about anything you know how and where to look. You could almost argue that for any build, those 3 skills are crucial to any start of the game. But moving forward now, you want to pick some traits that are going to optimize the melee build in your favor. And after digging through a ton of the traits, I've come to the realization that these select few will give you the best bonus and ability to succeed in Starfield starting out. And those are Serpent Embrace and the Wanted trait. And the reason I picked these 2 is because with melee builds, you want as much health and endurance as possible. The Serpent Embrace trait gives you an advantage in this department, but you will need to consistently grav jump. But based on what we saw in the Starfield Direct, I think grav jumping will be a key aspect and a fun aspect of the game, especially in firefights. The one negative I would say from this trait is that you're automatically put into the religious aspect of the Serpent Cult. Now, we don't know a lot about the Serpent Cult yet, but based on the Starfield wiki, it's House Varum, and they're a dangerous cult of fanatical religious zealots in Starfield. They worship the Great Serpent, and they are a hostile faction that resides outside the settled systems. So, though we don't know a lot about that, it does sound like it could be a negative aspect, depending on what playstyle you're going through in the game, good or bad. The other optional trait I spoke about is Wanted, because when you hit lower health, you get more damage. As a melee build, we will be stacking both health and endurance, so we have enough stamina to sprint and damage in close quarter brawls. And giving us a higher health pool with Serpent Embrace means we reach lower health and enable the higher damage bonus from Wanted earlier. Keep in mind both these traits can have downfalls, and there's even an option to stick to 0 traits in your first playthrough, but what's the fun in that? Now moving on to the skills you'll want for this melee build, I've compiled a list of several that I think are going to be key into optimizing your melee build. And those skills are broke down into tiers as such as physical, social, combat, science, and tech. So if we start off with physical skills, this will be your most important skill tree in your build due to the tier 4 Neurostrike skill. That skill in particular says it can daze your enemy long enough to reduce any foe to tears. Neurostrikes appear to be unarmed skill which may stun or disarm enemies in combat. Also in this skill tree, you're going to want to take wellness. And it states by embracing an active lifestyle and good nutritional habits, one may improve their overall sense of health and even gain prolonged life expectancy. Right out of the gate, that gives you an extra 30 points of health. And with a melee build, you're going to need that. Now, once you progress to tier 3, you're going to want to take the martial arts and reach the max 4th tier for Neurostrikes. We don't know the full details on martial arts, but the Starfield wiki does say for the first tier, you deal 250 damage with unarmed attacks, and then the second is deal 1,000 damage with unarmed attacks. Now, the second skill tree is the social skill tree. Though we won't be focusing on that because we're in a melee style build, it's important to grab the tier 1 skill Persuasion. And that says having some increased chance to persuade or pass a speech challenge will help you out in a difficult combat situation. Now, this isn't a priority and can be avoided if you need to, but I always think persuasion is a key aspect in any build. Now, the combat skill tree is an obvious choice for melee focused builds and martial weapons perks that you should focus on early. The tier 1 skill Dueling is your number 1 priority in this skill tree for the increased damage with melee weapons. Now, based on the gunplay we've seen in Starfield, I think we're all going to be using guns, especially early in the game. And because of our close quarter combat with the melee style build, I recommend picking up shotgun certification and pair that with the targeting skill. This will help point blank attacking in melee range if you're not doing enough damage with your melee weapons. Now, your physical tree will need to be increased fully to increase your max damage, and shotguns early on might give you that edge in survival until you max out that physical tree. Now, the next skill tree is your science skills. Now, melee focused builds will shy away from the science skill tree, but there is some helpful points to note. This skill tree is extremely helpful for crafting, outposts, and starships, which I think we're going to all be doing a lot no matter what your build is in the game. But for pure brawling and close quarter melee, and if you're just trying to advance through the story, this will limit your advancement and damage you until you need to craft specific chemicals or chems. Chems are consumables that give you a huge boost to stats and damage, though require a lot of progression in the science tree. So depending on how you want to play that, you could add some science skills or stay away from them. And the last skill tree is the tech skills. Similar to the science skill tree, tech will not be our focus on this melee build, but one option for increasing mobility and quickness is boost pack training. This will aid your boost pack and allow you to move in and out of combat situations more quickly, and movement, endurance, and jetpacking will be crucial to survival, especially in the open field and if you're trying to get into that up close combat. Now, other than your fist, I have some suggestions for weapons to use with the melee build, and that starts off with knives and axes. The weapons in Starfield kind of come in 3 broad categories: physical, energy, and electromagnetic. This melee build will primarily focus on multiple close to medium range weapons. Engagements are likely to play out in the open and or enclosed ships battles and inside many buildings. But with the melee build, you will need to use your speed, surprise, and force to close a distance and take advantage of your high damage. When in doubt, get aggressive and get in close. Now, we don't know a ton about armor, but going off of what we do know, the best armor for the melee build will increase your airborne effectiveness and provide traits to martial damage. And we know that Starfield has 4 categories with its armor: spacesuits, packs, helmets, and apparel. Each piece of armor has damage reduction and resistance. physical, energy, and electromagnetic. Armor also includes resistance to environmental effects such as thermal, airborne, corrosive, and radiation. And based on what Todd Howard said on the many biomes that we'll experience in Starfield, that can play a factor depending what planet or what biome we are going into. Other than this, we don't know much about the Starfield armor, other than that it can drop with a chance to have legendary armor with powerful traits. So in a nutshell, that's my melee build that I'll be running on day one of Starfield. Now this is the first of many videos in the series, and I'll soon to release my next build for my second character. So the goal of this build is to increase your damage, reduce damage taken, and be able to tackle any situation. And if you decide to go with this build, I hope it rings tried and true like it has for me in the past. But until next time, guys, this is Starfield Dad. If you did enjoy this video and it brings any help to you selecting what you want to play at on day one in Starfield, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments if you have a build of your own. I would love to hear from all of you. Until next time, Ad Astra.